budget hearing. Just to let you know, there's been a sort of adjustment here. There were some typos. We will do the Pledge of Allegiance and then move right into the presentation of the 2022 budget and then public comment. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Manager, do you want to begin the presentation?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is an opportunity for myself and the staff to present our spending plan for next year. To the extent that we were able to, some of the slides and some of the presentation was designed to be somewhat responsive to some of the comments that we've already gotten about the next year's spending plan. So without much ado, I'll move right into it. This first slide, I think you could see it from the audience, really is showing us what are some of the challenges that we had next year are. On the left-hand side, you could see what three of those major challenges were. Obviously, there's wage increases that happen under our collective bargaining agreements, continuing capital investment needs, which we all know about, along with the fact that we're doing a lot of paving in the next year, and coming with that is also our local match. So even though that's a really good thing, we still have the budget for it. On the right-hand side, I would say are a lot of good things that happened for Penn Hills in 2021 and 2022, not the least of which is the stimulus, which we've talked about. We'll talk a little bit more tonight about it. Without that stimulus, we would be probably in a much different situation than we are right now, and we wouldn't be able to have some of the plans that we're making. The stormwater fee continues to help our budget that was implemented 2 years ago. So that's beginning to build up now as its own fund. That's going to continue to help the municipality. We also know there's no increase next year in our recycling and garbage. That was something that was of critical importance to us moving when we prepared next year's budget. Also, we voted on, the mayor and council voted on the MMOs a few months ago, maybe 2 months ago. There was minimal increases in the pension obligations for Penn Hills next year. That was also something that helped significantly. And lastly on that slide, I just wanted to make mention of the fact that some of our wage tax revenue actually is increasing in 21 and 22. We were a little concerned at the beginning of 20 and in some parts of last year that we were going to see a drop off in our wage tax, and fortunately that hasn't happened. This slide is designed to show the public where the majority of our revenue comes from as an organization. As you can see, about 30% of our, and by the way, this doesn't really change from year to year, so if you were to look at last year's slide or the year before about where our revenue comes from, it would look similar. About 30% of our budget comes from real estate taxes, as you can see. 43% comes from Act 511 taxes, and Act 511 taxes mean wage taxes primarily. There's some other taxes that are part of Act 511, like mercantile tax as well, but the majority of what we call Act 511 taxes come from wage taxes. So you could see that the majority of our budget, approximately 70%, 75% of it, is actually made up of real estate taxes and wage taxes. The rest of it, as you can see, around 25% of it is really everything else. And when we talk about everything else, we're talking about grants, we're talking about the money that our EMS department generates from their billing and other things. So expense-wise, next year in the proposal, we're looking at, once again, our police department's about 36% of our budget. 30 to 35% seems to be the norm for what departments comprise in a municipal budget. Refuse and recycling is 12%. Also DPW 14%, and the debt is about 15%. I could go into further detail or answer any questions about this as we go. But it's really important to see that, we only have one. We do a magnificent job, I would argue, in terms of what we do with information technology. Our information technology budget's only 1% of our total budget. The library, which we're going to talk, which I hope to spend a little more time on. Again, it's only a percentage of our budget. Most of our budget is going towards debt, public safety, and the Department of Public Works. I want to spend a moment to highlight a very important financial concept that we talked about last year, that was presented last year and the year before, and that is the direction our fund balance is going in. As you know, Penn Hills was in a situation where we were using our fund balance to balance our budget every year, and when you do that, it begins to deplete your fund balance. And there's no right or wrong answer as to what your fund balance ought to be. It really depends on who you ask, but one of the things that I made clear to the public and mayor and council a few years ago was that it's really beyond any question that you cannot just every year deplete your fund balance year over year over year. Usually it's using your fund balance for 1 or 2 years to get by. Most municipalities use fund balance, but when you use it every year, that could really cause a problem for your organization. This graph was designed to show the public and the mayor and council where we have come from and where we think we're going. At the beginning of that graph in 2013, and by the way, all of the numbers on that graph except for 21, 22, and 23 are all from our audited financial statements. So they're not guesses. We are estimating what our 2021 fund balance is going to look like and what we think it's going to do in 22 and 23. But in 2013, this municipality had about a $7 million fund balance. And as you could see, between 2013, 2016, 2017, really 2018 is where we started to really deplete the balance, and we were under $4 million. And that started to level off in 2019. You could see that between 2018 and 2019, there was still a drop. We talk a little bit about the surplus that we had at the end of 20. You could actually see that where the graph bottoms out. But due to some things that we're doing, which we could talk about in a moment, share more detail about, we're projecting our fund balance to return to probably 2013 levels within the next 2 years. And I think if anything that you take away from any of this information tonight, I think it's really important everybody understand that, that graph shows where we're going, because there was no way that we could continue on the path that we were on. Fortunately, due to some things that we did here, and quite frankly, because of the stimulus, we're able to make decisions now on where we think we're going. But that's a really important graph, and so hopefully that's not lost on anyone. Here's another way of looking at it. It's the same material, it just looks a little differently. And you could see that we're projecting at the end of next year to have our fund balance probably over the $6 million mark. And so that's a good thing for Penn Hills. It's a tremendous thing for Penn Hills. And I think everyone deserves credit for that, not the least of which is our finance director and staff, also the mayor and council as well. So I'm happy to report that for the first time in a long time, our fund balance is starting to grow by meaningful amounts. So thank you. I wanted to spend a little time on the library budget because I know that was something that there was a lot of interest in and we got a lot of comments for at the last meeting. But basically, as you can see here, we're on track next year to spend $658,000 at the library, actually just under $659,000. And that money is actually coming out of 3 places next year. Usually you would see it all from one place out of the library's budget. The budget for the library in 22 is the same budget as it was for 21. The only change is the fact that some of the library expenses are coming from the stimulus fund directly because we're rehiring staff at a nonprofit that was in layoff status. And we also have the building maintenance. The building maintenance is another part of those costs, along with what we're going to give the library out of our general fund allocation. So it's the same budget, it's the same amount of money, it's just coming from 3 places instead of 1. And in December, the librarian and the library board is going to present an operating budget for 22 to council, which means that the library board and the director of the library are going to show the mayor and council what they plan to do next year, what their work program is. So I wanted to just share that information to show everyone that the library budget is actually staying the same. But again, using the stimulus, local governments are able to use stimulus to rehire folks that were impacted by COVID and laid off, and so that's what we're doing with the library next year, and that helps our budget. That's one of the reasons why we're looking at a little bit more positive financial picture next year. Code enforcement, this is a department that we've heard a lot about. This shows the staffing of code department between 20 and 22. Next year, we will be adding actually 2 officers, because right now, where we're at now, we actually have 3 officers. We've lost some people, unfortunately. So next year, we're moving to 5 code officers from 3, so we're really adding 2. We've also added an additional records administrator position in that department. Along with software that is already completed, we are deploying new software next year. The software implementation for the department is taking a little longer than what we would have liked it to. We purchased the software, it's already installed. It's basically going to take that whole department to a paperless system. It's designed to get away from all the carbon paper and have a truly electronic system. Implementing it, we're looking to implement it over the winter when maybe there's a little bit of a lull. Obviously with code, a lot of they're always busy, but summer's their busiest months. So they are hoping at the first of the year to really get that implemented. We have the software, it's already on all of the workstations, but we're continuing to use Citizen Serve until we can get to a place where we can fully transition to that new system. So, also, in next year's budget, as I alluded to in the beginning, we're paving a lot of roads in Penn Hills. And the money that's used to pave those roads is really primarily coming from 2 places. State grants that Penn Hills was fortunate enough to get 2 or 3 years ago. We got $3 million out of the state multimodal fund from the state. Before that was even spent, the state gave us another $2.5 million. So we have a combined $5.5 million in state funding for roads that we have to match. So next year what's happening is we are completing the 3rd year of the first grant. And that is a list of all the streets that we're looking to do next year. That's the end of Multimodal 1. But it gets a little complicated because in the same year that Multimodal 1 is ending, we're also going to start Multimodal 2. So this isn't showing you all the roads that we've paved up until now, but we've been using state multimodal dollars to pave this year. We also paved last year. Multimodal 2 is even bigger. That's maybe the white lettering could be a little difficult to read, but those are all the roads that we're going to be paving under Multimodal 2. So next year, there's some big numbers in the budget for paving because the money comes into the general fund and then it goes back out as an expense. We have to match that to the tune of, I think, 30%. So that's, I just want the public to know that, we've paved, I don't know the linear miles of road that we've done, but we've done quite a bit of roads in Penn Hills, and that's going to continue next year and at least for the next 2 or 3 years after that. So, and again, another Another big change in our budget next year is the fact that we are programming stimulus funds. We've talked about that. This is the same slide that was shown a little while ago as to how we look to program the stimulus in 2022. The first one being funding the first responders. In the budget proposal for 22, I've proposed to Mayor and Council an additional $300,000 in 2022 that would go specifically to our volunteer fire departments. So right now we give money as an allocation, as a stipend to all of our volunteer fire departments. I'm suggesting, and this actually isn't stimulus, it's actually money that we would be using because we are supplanting some revenue with stimulus. So these would be general fund dollars, but an additional $300,000. That's why there's an asterisk next to it. $300,000 additional funding in 2022 for all of the fire departments, in addition to the money that we already give them. That's part of the proposal. Also, the stimulus allows a municipality to pay for law enforcement officers out of that funding. So part of the proposal is 4 additional officers in the roster for 22. That would hopefully lead to a reduction of overtime, as well as better response, because we have a lot of call volume. I mean, we have a lot of calls, and I don't think that, if the chief isn't here right now, but I'm sure that he would tell you that that they could use additional staffing. But through turnover, we may not. If we add 4 people onto the staff in 22, by the time the stimulus would be spent down, we would have retirements and such. So we might end up to the level of staffing that we have today in, say, 25 or 26, because I think the stimulus has to be spent by 24. So that's part of the proposal as well. This is also, I wanted to highlight, because we've started to get some proposals from various groups in Penn Hills. I'm proposing $500,000 to help nonprofit organizations and entities that are directly involved with COVID response. So it's nonprofits involved with COVID response, as well as nonprofits that may have been impacted by the pandemic and they might have lost revenue. The municipality is allowed to use stimulus funds to supplant the revenue streams of a nonprofit that has lost funding because they didn't do fundraisers because of the pandemic or what have you. So that's part of the proposal as well. We've already received, and it was publicly presented, we've already received a proposal from the CDC, actually very early on, which everyone on council has. Also, in theory, the Penn Hills Public Library is a nonprofit. I don't know that they would get any of that money, but that is on the list just to highlight the fact that as a nonprofit, we could probably help them that way, as well as a number of other things. So we're starting to get some proposals from nonprofits. Those will get evaluated by the staff, and the staff will make recommendations to the mayor and council on those as we go. Also, this was shared before, part of the stimulus allows us to complete outdoor recreation projects, of which these are some. And this information came from the recreation director and public works director as to what they thought that their needs were based on their own recommendations. So you could look through that. Part of that also includes funding for what I'm calling community playgrounds. They're not necessarily owned by the municipality, but there's a playground at that one is actually owned by the municipality, one at McKinley. There's one at McKinley, there's one at Crescent Hills, there's also one in Rosedale, which recently got some state money as well. We're looking to see how we could improve some existing outdoor recreation facilities community-wide, even whether they're owned by the municipality or not. So those are some ideas. The rest of the stimulus, a big part of the stimulus, I should say, are the general fund reimbursements or supplant. That was another word that was used. And here they are again. We proposed them not too long ago. I'm showing them again this evening because when you look through our budget next year, you're going to see certain categories where it looks like there's a lot of money possibly coming in, and that's really coming into stimulus. That's really coming from stimulus. To the extent that we can, most of the stimulus that gets spent, whether it's on sewer work, whether it's on recreation, gets spent directly out of the stimulus fund. But in some cases, it's reimbursing the general fund as well. So that's, again, part of the proposal. And last but not least, as I shared, and I'm just at the 20-minute mark, which is where I wanted to be, we've talked a lot about the sanitary sewer projects. These are projects in the 2022 sanitary sewer system that total $10 million. We're not going to use $10 million of stimulus to do all these, but we've proposed $3 million, some of which we've already started for 21 out of the 21 stimulus. Some of those were emergency projects. These are not necessarily emergency projects. These are just $10 million worth of projects that we want to apply $3 million to. So I've taken up 20 minutes, and the purpose of this was to sort of give the mayor and council and public sort of the highlights, if you will, of where things are going. But cannot stress enough how important the stimulus is to Penn Hills, not just in terms of what it is doing and will do to help people that are impacted by COVID, but we really worked through the Treasury rules as much as we could to find ways to do needed tasks and to complete needed projects in a way that also helps our general fund. Because the stimulus will get spent. It has to get spent. The stimulus has to be completely spent by 2025. And in 2025, if we have the same financial situation that we have in 2020 or 2019, that's not a good place to be. And I don't want to speculate on what we would have to do, but I could tell you, if we didn't have the stimulus this year, Penn Hills would have to make some really hard decisions next year. So we're trying to balance all the needs that we have, plus use the stimulus in ways to help our overall general financial health. So that's what I have to say, and you can move on to any public comment that we might have.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, and I'm very happy to see we're moving in a positive direction. Any public comment?
Hello, everybody. I'm Felix Catlin, 223 Detour Drive. I want to thank Scott for that comprehensive presentation. I think it's probably one of the better budget presentations I've seen here.
You must not have seen very many.
Well, I've seen a bunch. I've been here about 2010 in the wings. I hope those slides will be made available to the public, the people who don't seem to make it to this room for one reason or another. I think they were their illustrative purposes were very good. I realize I probably have a 3-minute limit. Is that true?
I'm going to start the clock now, so
Okay.
you actually have
All
a
right.
little more. How's that?
So excuse my lack of sartorial splendor right now, but it speaks to my having been out in the community doing a lot of dirty work. Today I did a couple projects that do benefit our community, and I primarily, since I've lived in Penn Hills, have been, a half-time to full-time volunteer with many organizations trying to beautify, clean up, build community, working for nonprofits essentially, mostly with the Community Development Corporation, which is a 501c3, and the Penn Hebron Garden Club, which is a 100-year-old 501c4. So I want to speak to volunteer power and what it means to this community, and I can't really turn my head and speak at the same time, but I do see some of my volunteer cohorts today, and I want everybody on council and the staff as well to understand that the volunteer power that exists in this municipality is very, very important. The kinds of things that we do are things that municipal government is loath to do or cannot due to financial restrictions pursue. as what we call ourselves, a lot of times the 200, we sort of can identify who's who in the group, although we've been reduced a little bit in the last couple of years due to attrition, age, death, people moving. So there's even fewer of us actually out in the community actively working to better it. We as volunteers need some very subtle rewards. These rewards come in the form of small amenities and a little bit of fun. Heather Houlihan said last year at the budget meeting, she said, don't let Penn Hills be the place where fun goes to die. I like community development. I also have a piquant sense of humor. If it's not a little bit of fun, we're not going to do it. So we need some stuff. So just keep that in mind overarchingly, and with attention to the nonprofit portion of both the budget and the COVID monies that could be used for outdoor recreation or things that are COVID friendly or pandemic friendly, because I'm sure COVID 2023 is on its way. One of the things that has gotten no attention is the proposal from Howard Davidson to pursue the previously planned amphitheater that was to be on the library property at the building of the library 11 years ago. What that would represent for this municipality would be a destination for people from outside of our community, a showcase for those same, economic attraction. It would be something that is unusual and useful and COVID friendly. If it could not be placed on the library property for reasons of spatial consideration, I would hope that perhaps we could find a place to put it somewhere in our community. We have, as destinations, we have, and I'm very aware of pre-budgeting and being ahead of the curve on some things. This municipality is ahead of the curve on this beautiful municipal building. So many municipalities will be replacing their buildings. We have 2 beautiful schools that, okay, I'm almost there. We have a beautiful library. These are great places. We had a great Y too, and the fact that we let that slip from our hands is not completely our fault, but it's a tragedy. In the absence of not being able to pursue the amphitheater, which I feel strongly about, or certain things that may be beyond our reach, I would, in its place, I would recommend that you fully fund John Scaglione's work in Parks and Recs, because I think the work that he does has the potential to benefit the most people in Penn Hills in the manner to which I just spoke. And also, I would hope that any of these projects would promote a little bit of racial unity in this municipality. I would really like to see blacks and whites and browns and any other identifiables, self-identifiables, do things in public spaces together instead of siloing in churches and restaurants and bars. We really do need to get out together, because I think that this place could be a shining example for racial harmony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Hello. My name's Howard Davidson, 3857 Green Valley Drive. I wrote to Mayor and Council previously, and I'm going to use that letter to help me out this evening to go over some of the stuff, and some has been answered. I had a question first on page 51, which would be the Code Enforcement Department's budget. Sean, a quick question. Did not the records officer slide over and become an inspector?
That did happen, but she's not here anymore. So
Well, at least how much of the records officer's salary was spent this year?
I don't have it in front of me. What you're talking about, the records officer was a position that was created, I want to say in 2016 or 2017, and then that individual became a code officer and then the records officer was vacated for a time. But now we have it back.
I'm trying to figure out whether there's a net gain of 1 or 2 in the Department of Code
There was a
Enforcement.
slide on it?
Scott, I can answer
Oh,
that.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
your
Please
slide
do.
says 2.
I can answer that, Howard.
Yeah.
In 2019, the records coordinator position was budgeted for. In 20 was budgeted for.
Excuse me, can you hear? I'm not sure your microphone's on.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. In 2020, the records coordinator position was not budgeted for. I'm sorry, I'm getting my ears all messed up. In 2021, it was not budgeted for. The position was filled by a library employee in 2021, but it was not in the budget. So that is an increase that was actually in 21, but not budgeted for. There's only one being filled next year as a new position.
Okay. So what we lost was a position this year in code enforcement. There wasn't help for code enforcement this year, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
We lost the records administrator this year.
It was not budgeted for 2021. However, the position was filled in 2021.
Okay. Now go on. The planning department, as you know, has always had my heart. And they're doing a great job, and they all deserve raises and all that sort of thing. But with this COVID money coming in, I can't see why we don't hire a new planner and a new finance officer to handle all these projects and handle the flow of the money. You are under a time limit. Now, I understood the argument before was, we can't hire with COVID money because 2 years from now we might have to lay somebody off. But there's a lot of planners I know, and I imagine some finance officers, some young people out of college would love to work somewhere like Penn Hills for 2 years. That was the advice given to me when I first came to Penn Hills. Go to Penn Hills for 2 years. Well, I ended up for 40, but the advice was go get 2 years of experience in local government. Anyway, that's just the thought. I think we should hire local people to fill a job in planning and finance rather than hire consultants. You're probably going to end up having to hire consultants if you want to push a lot of these projects because the current staff can't handle the load. In recreation, I agree with what Felix said. I hope you fully fund the recreation department. I say department. The budget says department. Everybody calls John a department director, and the organizational chart says the recreation department is a budget, except for the most current one. Let's see. I'm getting off astray again. I think that we should reestablish the recreation department rather than a division of public works. And I'll move on. The library, I hear you tonight, and I appreciate what was said tonight. There was a lot of confusion on that before. In regard to sanitary sewers, I make the same comment that we're taking advantage of the situation. I know that it says sewers are eligible. We're going to fund a lot. You're going to put a lot of money down the sewers. But if you look at whether people's sewer bills are not going down, the sewer bills are not going away. Where you could fund, if you wanted to, 100% of the delinquent sewer bills for the people that couldn't pay the bills because they got laid off because of COVID. And Scott and I talked about this before. That's money from the feds into our pockets directly. And the homeowners benefit from you getting them out of a mess with delinquencies. We benefit from people who would otherwise be delinquent. We get the revenue into our sewer bill, our sewer fund. My other comment goes back to the slides that we saw tonight. I asked for a lot more detail on COVID money, and I appreciate the slides we got tonight. I didn't check the budget online lately. Is the new information in the online version of the budget now? The slides that you put up just now?
They will be. They will
It will
be. This tonight will be online later tonight.
Is there,
It's live stream now, but it'll be uploaded.
perhaps more people would have had more questions if they had saw it before tonight. But I'm glad it's eventually, it's finally here, and I'm glad about that. I had a question about the community development program in the letter that I wrote you guys. Chris has corrected me in regard to where the CD money is. It reminded me again of my memory. I used to buck heads with Eddie Schreckengost in the finance department. I said, the community development fund needs to be in the operating budget and the capital, a little bit operating, a little bit of capital. But understanding now, it's not in it at all. If you don't know that, that is the situation. The CD money is not shown in the budget. Yet our charter says all funds should be. Now I understand that you have budget hearings for the CD money, and I lost that argument with Eddie Schreckengost, but I'll bring it up again just so you're aware. With one question, are there any other funds besides CD that are not shown in the budget?
I'm sorry, are you asking?
Yeah, I'm asking Scott.
Well, the CD budget, it's on a fiscal year, it's not on a calendar
I
year.
don't, please,
Well,
you're cutting into my
you
3
asked me a
minutes.
question, and I started to answer, and now you're answering it for
Well,
yourself.
I don't want you to cut
I'm
into
not
my
gonna
3
answer-
minutes
I'm-
with a
I'm not gonna
long
answer
explanation on
questions.
why,
I'm
how
not gonna
CD
answer them.
works.
If I start to answer the question, you have to let me finish.
Okay,
That's
all right.
rude. That's very rude not to do that.
All right,
Okay, please let me
Go
answer the
ahead.
question.
And let's
Bring it around.
not count the answer as part of his time, please.
I'm not.
Okay.
The CD budget, we all know that we have it. It's all publicly available, and you're right, we have multiple public hearings about it, we have multiple meetings about it, but it's not on a calendar year. So why isn't it in this book? That's the reason why. Having said that, it would not be difficult for us to take the CD budget that's already done, and we can include it as part of the document.
that's what I wish
Yeah,
you'd
we
do.
can do that.
Okay, so what's
It's just never been done before, even I think when you were here, it
it
was
has,
never done.
it's been a while, but it has been done before.
It's a point taken.
Mayor, without going in Howard's time, can I answer that? The last time the full budget was in the budget, the full CDBG budget was in the actual budget was 1993. It was then only shown as revenues and expenditures up until 2004. And in 2004, there was a note in the budget that said, because the CDBG budget isn't adopted, like at the time of this budget right now, we don't know what the money's gonna be next year. And we also we haven't had hearings to say what it's gonna go to. So it may be premature. I think there's a note in the 2004 budget that it says it'll be budgeted at a later time. And that time, in those days, 1993, we actually didn't get the CDBG budget, came out in March. Now we're on a fiscal year where it's July 1st to June 30th. But the point of I believe the reason it was that particular budget was taken out, I don't know if there's others that aren't in the budget. The reason that was taken out is that right now you would be talking about money that we don't actually know what we're gonna get. And you'd be having estimates on activities like, say, for food pantries and things like that, that we actually haven't had the hearings to discuss what to put in the budget. Does that make sense? So I think we could put these things in the budget.
There's a reason it's not there.
That's right.
So, from my perspective, it would be rather easy to create a line item in either the capital or the operating and put in the numbers that you just had hearings on a few months back. Would be easy. But I'm still waiting for an answer to my question. Are there monies other than the CD budget that are not in the general budget this evening? No other
Not that
funds?
I'm aware. I mean, we started the stimulus fund. The stimulus fund is in the budget. I think it's fund number
20.
So there's some new funds in there now. You could actually see.
No, I'm just asking, is there money that is not being shown in the budget like CD? Okay, thanks. My last comment would be general comments about the federal government's description of how COVID money is supposed to pass through us, what its purposes are for, and the areas that we're neglecting. You're doing a great job in terms of reimbursing us, looking at the operating budget, looking at the capital, but you're all doing a lousy job in terms of looking at the community. I'll give you an example. You said, we're not hurting that much because we didn't have to lay off police officers. But you did lay off library staff. You did lay off senior center staff. You could go back and reimburse them for lost salaries if you wanted to.
That's what we're doing, Howard.
You're reestablishing them, you're calling them to work again, or you're paying them
No.
for lost salary?
We presented it a while ago. The mayor and council on the last meeting that I don't think you were there, it was the meeting that was a week ago. They approved a budget amendment for Penn Hills. A big part of that budget amendment was to reimburse the municipality for their wages at the senior center and the library. Because what happened was both of those services were scaled back and people were laid off when the pandemic began. With the stimulus dollars, we were able to call them back full-time at the senior center. And we were able to call back library staff, but we're able to pay for those wages out of stimulus. So in 2021,
Yeah.
we're reimbursing. You gotta remember, this is 22, but for 21, which is already done, we are reimbursing the municipality for the senior center's wages.
Can I interrupt?
That was all in the proposal that was made for the 2021 budget amendment. The 2021 budget amendment that was done a week ago, part of that is to take stimulus to reimburse the municipality for the wages of the senior center employees and the library.
When those staff members were laid off, were they sent home with pay?
The people that were laid off were sent home and were on unemployment.
Are they now being reimbursed for their lost wages during that period?
No, they didn't work during that period. There was no wages.
You could.
We
One is you
could.
could.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could do a lot of things.
All right. Well, that was my statement.
Maybe I misunderstood what you were suggesting.
I'm suggesting that we help people where we can. I suggested that we pay delinquent sewer bills. I have people that got laid off. Now I'm going to suggest that we help businesses. You know, we could give grants to businesses.
You're correct.
And we're not, that I can see. And people say, oh, well, everybody's doing fine, the shopping center's okay. Well, we just lost a movie theater. We lost some restaurants. But we don't have anything for them. I remember, as planning director, I always regretted that with our CD budget, we never had enough money to create programs for businesses. No low-interest loan programs, matching grants. We couldn't do it. So we always went to the county and tried to encourage the county. Now we have enough money to be able to do that, but we're not. That's all. And my last comment would be, I see some other communities are, I don't know if it's eligible, I'd divert Jim Getzey on this. Can we spend money on demolition with COVID money? I see some other communities doing it. You think they're going to end up in trouble then?
No, I didn't say that. But to answer that specifically, we checked with our auditor about whether we could use stimulus for demolition. I know, I'm not sure, maybe it was you, it was other folks that were pointing out what the city of Pittsburgh is doing with their stimulus. The city of Pittsburgh's rules for how they use the stimulus is different than Penn Hills. And the reason for that is because Pittsburgh has what are called qualified census tracts, which we do not have. It's not the same thing as what people in CDBG might know of as a qualified census tract. The qualified census tracts are in the Mon Valley and in the city. If you have those, you're able to use the stimulus in a little bit different way than us. But there's nothing that we've read, and there's no one that I've spoken to about our specific case to let us do demolition out of stimulus. Having said that, last week we approved a contract for upcoming demolition. One of the things that we can do because we do have freed up general fund dollars, because we're using that reimbursement slash supplant general fund technique. I've already asked the planning director to go to the contractor that's doing those demos and say, can we get a price on doing more demos? So I think we're gonna end up being able to do additional demolition, but it's probably not gonna be funded directly out of stimulus, because we just cannot use it that way.
When I first came to work for Penn Hills, they had certain monies available for low-income census tracts.
This is different.
You're interrupting me now. And I told the mayor, you're shaking your head, you don't even know what I'm gonna say.
But
What am I gonna say?
what you were saying about those low-income census tracts, that's different than a qualified census tract. The qualified census tract is a new animal that we actually had to struggle to figure out, what is it? Am I correct, Chris? Because we didn't understand what that meant, so we had to find that out. So a lot of the things that are happening in some of the other jurisdictions are happening because they have those census tracts that we don't have.
Well, then I'd suggest you look for a qualified block group. Look for the eligibility of qualified block groups. Because when I came to Penn Hills, they said, oh, we can't have this money because we don't have an eligible census tract. And I told the planning director at the time, I told the county, well, just use block group data. Well, we used block group data and got $1 million.
I'm sorry, but it is, Howard, you can look up, like, we were confused because we were confusing I felt like, what's a qualified census tract? And yet you can actually look up a map that shows qualified census tracts, and they're in the city of Pittsburgh, and there are no qualified census tracts in Penn Hills. We have CDB, and now we also do have census tracts with block groups, full block groups in them that qualify, but it's not part of this program.
Is there a definition for qualified census tract?
Yeah, I think there is. If you look up qualified census tract, how they came up with them, where they came from, we have no idea, but
It's
there
like
is
they
a map.
came up with it just for this program.
Right. So when you see some projects, I know that people see activities that are happening, like the manager said, in the city of Pittsburgh, and you're thinking, how come they can do that and we
Well,
can't?
how does
They have
McKee-
different rules than we do.
The Keysport has.
Again, McKeesport does it. They have a qualified census
There-
tract.
As I said,
Right.
the Mon Valley and the city has those.
It seems to me something you should look into and push.
We did.
Because we're not keeping up with demolition. We're not keeping up with the need for demolition. I can point to the one right across from the Penn Hill Service Association on Universal Road as an example.
I'd like to talk to you about those demolitions at some point, Howard. Those are being held up by the State Historic Preservation Office. They're considered historic, and we cannot tear them down.
Yes.
So we're looking at other funding.
Well,
Howard,
maybe
Howard.
somebody should go to TV stations.
May I?
How about we let
I-
Mr. Davidson finish his, I'm
I
sorry.
disagree with the manager on the demolition. We could look into that, but I think demolition would be eligible under the stimulus.
Let's let Mr. Davidson finish his question, then if you want to answer that, you can go ahead, but
Well, I'll end with a statement rather. I understand what you're up against. You're up against the interim final rule, you know? Leave it to our government to come up with a phrase, interim final. And if things in there were clearer, we'd all be better off. And everybody's afraid, well, you're gonna undertake some project and it's not gonna be eligible and you're gonna have to reimburse. I doubt that that's gonna happen. Anyway, good luck to you.
Mayor, if I might add also, the Howard had said about having CDBG in the capital program. It is in the capital program, but only capital projects, not food pantries, things like that, because those are not capital activities. So you will, if you look at the capital program, see things that we pretty much know about: street paving, $200,000 a year, the community centers, things like that. But we don't have in there the food pantries, because those are not, in fact, capital activities.
thank you.
William Mouts, 1335 Maple Avenue. Two things on my mind tonight, dealing with the budget. One of them, I've been coming to these council meetings long enough to know there seems to be an awful lot of change orders when there's a construction project or whatever. And I hope it's not true, but I can't help but thinking, are these contractors underbidding because they know very well all they gotta do is put in a change order in and they'll get what they want in the end run? I hope that's not true, but maybe you could hold those contractors' feet to the fire. I know in some cases it can't be helped, you know, like the sewer problems, pumps and so forth. But maybe in the future, we need to hold the contractors' feet to the fire, that their first bid gotta be what they're getting paid. Don't be putting no change orders in because you've omitted it in the first place. Just a thought, you know, hopefully that's not true. The second item I have a problem with is the, obviously, everyone knows in Penn Hills we have a problem with police overtime. It could have been helped along a little bit last month or the beginning of this month when our mayor asked to hire a person to help along the picking or the clearing of new police officers. Members of council decided not to go along with that. So now the police are getting more overtime up until what? Next month they're going to be continuing, all this overtime is going out the window. You know, and I think our police are great. We had an incident on Maple Avenue just a few weeks ago, or a few days ago. In a matter of probably 5 minutes, there were 6 patrol cars on my street. Okay. Now I'm wondering, a lot of incidents that are happening in Penn Hills, do they really require a police officer? Could we hire perhaps a mental health expert? There's a lot of issues that aren't really threatening, that a police officer needs to show up, like a domestic abuse that's not escalated to somebody pulling a gun yet. That somebody with a mental health degree could talk to these people and straighten them out. There's a city in Austin, Texas, who hired a mental health expert, a couple actually, and they claimed their domestic abuse cases have dropped by 26%. There's a city in North Carolina claimed the same thing. Parts of Philadelphia have done the same thing. In one area of Philadelphia, the murder rate dropped 30% because they hired a mental health expert to go out to these cases. Statistically, a person who is murdered by somebody they know, a family member or a neighbor or somebody close. That starts with a small incident, a control issue perhaps, and it leads down the line to getting worse and worse and worse. If someone with mental health abilities could meet with these people and talk them down, perhaps it wouldn't escalate into a murder. And what's happening in Penn Hills lately? The last statistic I found from 2019, the only community that surrounds us that has a higher crime rate than us is Wilkinsburg. That doesn't sound too good, does it? I think we ought to rethink, you know, let's put it this way. Police can't really stop crimes like a murder, which happens usually in your home or in an apartment. You know, they can't walk into somebody's house without a warrant. You know, they're good for stopping maybe car theft or a robbery in progress. But horrendous crimes like murder, it don't just start, you know, from a quick incident. It usually takes weeks or months for an issue to build up to that point. When you're talking about a family member killing another family member or a neighbor. Just something to think about. We need to hire some professional mental health people. Or new police officers we're going to hire, maybe they should have some mental health training. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Faith Milazzo, 121 Castle Drive. I just have 2 things. To sort of add on to what Bill said, I'm concerned a little bit about the crime as of late. Apparently there was another shooting today. I've heard it might have been a 6-year-old kid shooting a 4-year-old kid or vice versa. I'm not entirely sure. Nothing really police can do about that, but my understanding is the shooting that happened Saturday night, that was, I don't know if it was resulting from a bar, but someone was shot across from a bar. So I think our police do a fine job. I've always said that and I stand by that, but I'm not sure if it's, we need more police officers, do we need cameras? I have said for years, I feel Penn Hills is generally very safe. I'm not afraid to live here. I walk in various neighborhoods. I pick up litter all over Penn Hills. It's not a concern, but there have been a number of shootings and crime lately, so I don't know if cameras are the answer. I love Bill's idea of having maybe some mental health training. I don't know how feasible that is, but I just wanted to express that because it is a concern. And then to what Scott said, it is a concern about the fund balance, that we can say things are great this year, maybe next year, but you know, I'm not planning to leave in a year or two, so I'm going to care if in a couple of years we're going to have a negative balance or we're going to reach zero. So I've brought this up in the past, and I guess it's more of a question than anything, but I think one of the slides, it said that people got 2 to 3% raises, and that seems to be the amount Penn Hills people get every year. Sometimes it's 3 or 4%, and I'm just wondering if Penn Hills would ever consider maybe one year giving people a 1 or a 1.5% raise. I mean, we all want to get raises. We all want to be rewarded for our jobs. I know last year at my job, I and I don't know, thousands of other employees, we didn't get a raise. I mean, it was COVID times. We were happy to be employed. So is that ever a chance? I'm not saying that the Penn Hills workers don't deserve raises. I don't want anyone to misunderstand, but obviously salaries and benefits, that's a huge expense. And every year you give people 2, 3, 4% raises, that's more and more money every year. So I'm just wondering, is that like an annual thing that you decide every year? Is this like sort of a contract for every 3 years? And is it a possibility for them to have much smaller raises?
Yeah, sure. The majority of all of those wage increases are unionized workers. So that is coming out of a bargaining process under which they're getting whatever that is. I would tell you that I think you would have to look at what inflation is. What is your bargaining power? I think it's a point well taken. I think every time the municipality negotiates a contract, we try to get the best deal we can for the municipality. I think there have been freezes at various times, perhaps. I've only been involved here for the last 3 years, but a lot, that is what comes out of a bargaining process. And I could tell you that it's sometimes difficult. That could be a difficult process, especially when, for instance, you have a paramedic department or you have a police department. And so when you're looking now at what the cost of living is now, I don't even know what it's going to end up as for 21, but it's probably not going to be 2 or 3%. It's probably going to be higher than that. But those are things that come out of a bargaining process.
Okay.
And that's a two-way street.
My name is Andrea Getze. I'm at 151 Crescent Hills Road, and I am Mrs. James Getze. So I just want to say anything that will not be of conflict. I have a question about the parks. I noticed that the parks in the slide you showed came from all over Penn Hills. And in the regs, it was difficult to understand what parks qualified for assistance. It talked about parks that are in qualified census tracts. So tonight you made clear that, well, we don't even have those. Do we have to only have parks that are in areas that where we can spend CDBG funds? Are there any limitations?
What we're looking at in terms of, I don't have it in front of me. If you go back to the stimulus presentation.
I did.
Okay.
Too, yeah.
It is, what we're looking at is what we're calling the Treasury FAQs. There's something that goes a little bit beyond the
Right.
interim final rules.
Yeah.
These are things that came out later,
You're
which
right.
were issued as FAQs. And the FAQs said that you could use stimulus for outdoor recreation. That's what we read. That's what we're looking at.
Just as simple as that, because I did go to the FAQs for that, and it finally ended up with outdoor recreation after it said you can only do it in qualified census tracts areas, or you could do it if you could show that your park was run down by the overuse of it during COVID years. I thought, well, that's a little crazy. You know, how could you identify what wore out that year? But then it ended with the comment about outdoor recreation areas. And I welcome the opportunity to apply for assistance for our community park, but I don't want to do it if we wouldn't qualify.
Our understanding is that it's qualified.
All right, I'm counting on you. All right, and the other thing I wanted to ask was, would there be outreach to businesses? I really do like all the comments that Howard made and his concern for our community, that more money can be put, because $500,000 for all the categories that you listed is a fraction of the $18 million, you see. And there was a lot of suffering that occurred, as we can tell by businesses like, I believe, Penn Hills Lawn and Garden might have had a big loss. I believe that our restaurants like Fun Asian, which were closed during that time, and people in places, well, like Penn Hills Cinema, which is, I guess, now just closed. They couldn't make it. And would there be an outreach to determine from our local businesses who suffered, and then perhaps set up a grant program for them? So that's all I want to suggest there. And then in regard to our budget, I want to say I really thought it looked really nice. I mean, you have a nice, clean format. Nice printer, is that what it is? Or is it nice type font? I mean, it just looked good, you know? I'm really impressed by good-looking documents. But I want to see in the budget and more explanation of whenever there are big increases in categories, maybe 10%, maybe 20%, that there would be a footnote that says, this is because we're buying an ambulance. This is because there are no explanations. And there were, especially this year, tons of areas where there were huge increases. The huge increases were obviously where the stimulus money went. But we don't know, because there's no explanation. I would like to see council's budget, because you, as a council, can change that budget. The manager has presented you with a framework, and you can take that framework and say, I'd like to put asterisks in here and explain what's going on in the areas where we have made big increases. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Any further public comment? Well, we did that almost on budget. We're 2 minutes over budget, but I'm pretty proud of that. Thank you so much. Is there anything further you want to add, Manager?
No, thank you.
Okay, having said that, this meeting is adjourned. Have a very good evening.